and welcome to today's webinar, Bridging the Gap, Integrating Authentication with Authorization to Solve Critical Access Challenges in Higher Ed. This is our mostly monthly webinar focused on all things identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet2. I'm Jody Tracy, Accelerator Program Manager, and I'll be your host today. To get us started, here's just a brief overview of today's agenda. We'll do some brief introductions, we'll hear from our presenters, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions, and then we'll close with a few closing remarks. So just a few reminders about today's program. As always, we'll be taking questions and comments live using the Zoom Q&A function, so please send us your questions during the presentation. We'll address your questions after the presentation. We also encourage you to post messages in the chat. We like to see your comments and questions there as well. So just be sure when you're posting, your message is being sent to everyone in that drop-down menu. This event is being recorded. If you registered for this IAM online, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. And these materials will also be posted to the InCommon website and the IAM online YouTube channel. So please watch your inbox for these links. And now about today's topic. Who can access what and why? This is the simple question this webinar will address. It's one that costs higher ed institutions thousands of staff hours and can create frustration for users. It's one of the most persistent operational headaches across campus. So today we are exploring how 3 universities, the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard University, and University of Alaska, have transformed this daily struggle by implementing innovative front door authorization approaches. They've moved authorization decisions to the entry point rather than leaving them scattered across individual applications. Today, we're joined by Chris Heiser and Garrick Hamlin from University of Pennsylvania, Alpha Sena and Aaron Rankin from Harvard, and David St. Pierre Bance and Orlandis Brown from University of Alaska. I'm excited to go ahead and turn things over to Chris Heiser, who will kick us off today.
All right, so we have 3 institutions talking about stuff. There's a lot to go over. These are kind of lightning talkish, so I have a lot of slides as usual, and I'm going to breeze through them. If you want to talk about more details in the InCommon group or Slack channel or wherever, I'm happy to talk about it. We did share the configs for a lot of this in the grouper wiki. If people want to duplicate any of this, let me know and we can go over that. But we're going to talk about what is front door authorization that is sort of across all 3 institutions. At Penn, how we did our reference groups, how we report on things to make sure things are good, the error pages people see, and then specific policy groups that could be used for licensing, and how people can self-service their configuration and role, and a little bit of detail about how this integrates with SSO and architecture. Next slide. Skipping that, there's a video if you want to see what we did at Penn for marketing to try to get this out at Penn. So that, if you go back to that video for a second, and just looking at this right now, a user is going to go to our SSO, which is Shibboleth, we call it web login. And before we had this, invalid users that we know that are invalid are going to go to the application. If you just hit play and fast forward the video to the end, you'll see like the end result. I think the sound doesn't work, but just, yeah, go to the end somewhere. You can fast forward that. Yeah, more. Yep, to the end. Yeah, right there. Just hit pause for a second. So, there we go. So at the end, if our Shibboleth can determine that someone is not eligible for a service, it can send them to an error page instead of the application. So each service provider can register with the front door and say what the eligible population is. Hopefully that fits into a reference group that's sort of like a built-in population that we'll talk about. If not, it could be a specific policy group. And just a slight correction from the introduction. This doesn't replace any authorization that a system is doing to make sure that people are allowed. It's just another layer of access blocking. So you still need to deprovision authorization in your application. You still need to do checking, but this is what we refer to at Penn as like the front door security guard. So You might have a front door security guard that just does a cursory check, like make sure they have an ID that's valid, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't know which doors in the building that you can actually access after you get through that front door step that could turn some people away. You still need that underlying access. So next slide. Um, so we spent a lot of time talking about what built-ins we would have, and we came up with 12 groups. There are about or maybe 10 groups. There are 5 concentric-ish circles or ovals here. Workforce is sort of the tightest population to the institution, which means you work here in any regard. It includes the health system, it includes student workers, it includes researchers and contractors. But basically, if you're working at Penn in some regard, that is our smallest circle. Member above that includes students. It includes some related institutions like the Children's Hospital and things like that. Affiliate includes guests and even has a small grace period on students. Recent affiliate has a grace period on the whole affiliate thing, so you don't have really old accounts, you just have recent accounts, and then we can have alums in there. All of these you could also pick if you want two-step or not, just to make sure that the credential hasn't been hacked. So these are like, hopefully we can fit most service providers into one of these buckets. Next slide. Okay, here's the architecture slide, sorry. Um, so basically a user goes to Shibboleth, that's step one. If there's no registration or the user is valid, they go to the service and they don't even know anything happened. If there is a registration for the front door, Shibboleth knows about that, and it also knows through entitlements which group or groups you have to be in to go to the application. If you're not eligible, then you go to the error page. Each registration for this front door at Penn, you have 3 choices for error pages. There's a generic page, which is a dynamic page. We'll see an example that tries to help the user out without having to open tickets. So for instance, if the app requires that you are in MFA and you're not, it'll give you a link and tell you to go do it. If you're not in a certain training, it'll give you a link to go take that training and come back. Um, a custom error page, each app could have, some text on there that says, email this email address or open a ticket here or call this phone number or things that are specific to that app. And if you want a completely custom error page or maybe something that's app hosted, we can redirect to that. So it can look branded like the service. You can control it yourself and you can do whatever you want. So at a high level, that's what the front door authorization is at Penn. Next slide. In order to turn this on, we don't want to block people out. So we want to make sure that whatever policy we're going to have is appropriate for that service. If the service is integrated with Grouper, then we know the users in that group and or in that service, and we can definitely say this group is fine for front door. If we don't exactly know, and some service managers don't know, then we have a way to give a report of users that have been logging into that service over the last 9 months. We have a feed from Splunk that gives us that information. And we know at the time of login if they were in any of these 10 buckets. And we can basically use that report to make sure that we're not going to block any users we shouldn't be. That report can be misleading because it does include people who authenticated who aren't valid. So you need to sort of look at that report and see, are the ones that aren't in the group that you want, are they eligible anyways? Is the service blocking them? So you kind of have to be a little subjective about it. Next slide. So we have a GSH template in Grouper, which some people might be familiar with. It's Grouper is an authorization platform that you can build on. And we basically made this little screen in Grouper where you can go and pick a SP entity ID or OIDC config, and it'll give you a report of users who've logged in and give you a summary of that. Next slide. This is an example of the summary. You get a CSV that you can sort of slice and dice, but this is an example where it says like of two-step, of workforce, of member, of affiliate, affiliate or alum, recent affiliate, what percent of the users are in there. And we started collecting this back in August 2024. So those are all the numbers we have. If you have an app that, is cyclical in the year, it's kind of hard to use this perhaps, but basically this can give you an idea of like which bucket you want to pick. And if there are some users that aren't in two-step, in this case, 7 out of 1,009 aren't in two-step, maybe you can follow up with them and try to get them into two-step before you start requiring it. Next slide. This is a CSV that comes back and it gives you all the users, and you can basically filter by who's not in two-step, who's not in workforce, who's whatever. Maybe the people don't have the appropriate affiliation that they need, and we need to make sure that they are tracked as having this relationship with the university, or maybe we need to widen the net a little bit or do a policy group. So this report can help managers of a service know if a front door is appropriate or if they need to work with the users to make sure that no one's going to be blocked. Next slide. So if the reference groups don't work for a service, and you can imagine services like that, you can also do a policy group, or you could do both. So a service can make a specific group for that service, and they can use that as the front door and do whatever they want. This sort of building block in the IAM toolkit opens the doors to a lot of solutions that are very easy to do. And we're going to talk about one of those, and Alaska is going to have a more detailed description of how they do the same thing. But once you can do policy groups with a front door and you can customize the error screen, it's wide open. Next slide. We're not going to go over the details of this, but this is an example of one that requires training. So our nursing school has some apps where you need something called REDCap training and HIPAA training, and you have to be working in the nursing school and you have to be in two-step. So you see a lot of intersections here. That's what the blue boxes are. We want people who satisfy all that stuff. And if you're in there, you can do it. If not, you need an error page to help you out. So next slide, we'll see that error page. So if you're logging into that app and you're not eligible, you'll see this. It'll tell you exactly why you're not eligible, and even give you a link of how to go take that training, and maybe give you some information about when it expires. Basically, we want to reduce tickets. We want to make the apps secure so that only trained people are using them. And we want to make it easy to use and easy to configure. This is a custom UI and grouper that you can configure with configuration to check certain conditions, put certain text on the screen, and it's an easy way for apps to have their own little kind of customized error page. Next slide. Another use case that is sort of up and coming that we've done in non-production is managing licenses. An example is Adobe, our workflow tool, Atlassian licenses. A lot of these things, you provision licenses to people that may think they need them and then they don't, or you provision them in case they might need them, and you might be spending more money than you need to. So imagine Grouper, which we call pen groups, managing the license provisioning for Adobe, which is what project we want to do this summer. It knows that you don't have a license. It takes you to the error page. That error page has a button that says, claim this license if you're a faculty or staff, or if you're not a faculty or staff, it says go contact your department. And self-service, people can use those licenses. And then we also have a feed from Splunk for web login logs, so we know that someone who has a license hasn't logged in 60 days or whatever the service wants to set that limit at. It can automatically revoke that license. Right now at Penn, we have 17,000 Adobe licenses provisioned. When we look at logs, only 4,000 people are actively using it. So we might be able to change our license terms and save money if we can do self-service provisioning with this front door feature. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through this slide either, but setting up that licensing is not simple in Grouper. You might have some people that automatically get licenses. For example, in our workflow system, if you're assigned a task, you need a license. You might have some people who probably are going to need it. You want to automatically do that. You have some people that self-claim it. You have the feed from Shibboleth that says we need to revoke it. So it is a little bit complex to set this up, but once you do, it saves money and is a better experience for both end users and the support staff that used to have to do this manually. Next slide. Garrick.
Hi, hello. I'm Garrick. I'm also working with Chris at University of Pennsylvania. So this is what a user sees when they open a ticket to intake an app. You can have a policy group right here from the beginning, but they may be more likely to pick a course front door reference group instead. Next slide. So here you can see that this is just an interface. Again, Grouper's providing this. This lets you set all sorts of application metadata. It also lets you, app owners for the apps, which are also in Grouper, and admins to manage the front door authorization data per application. And let's go to the next slide. So here we have the overall architecture. So you can see Grouper writes the application configs to LDAP, and Grouper also has the entitlement data that is leveraged by SSO, and that goes directly to the Shibboleth DB. Both Grouper and the IDP are using Shibboleth for their backend. And if we go to the next slide, we can just talk about that real quick. So we had the front door configurations come from LDAP, so that's where the application data comes from. A lot of the subject data is coming from Shibboleth. In particular, the entitlements are the important thing for authorization. We're using actually logical replication. This is the in-core Postgres logical replication, and we're replicating essentially 4 individual tables. It gives us real-time entitlement. So, as soon as it's changed in Grouper, it propagates. It goes into the wall, it gets pulled, it's in the database on the IDP side. We look at other approaches. So we have an LDAP architecture we're using for the SSO as well. But there was, we couldn't achieve real time with that. This is a much faster way to get the entitlement data, and it makes the front door authorization and the license management much more feasible. Next slide, please. Yeah, I guess that's it for Harvard, and thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Next slide, please. All right, so for Harvard, our problem statement came about, having lots of application teams using SSO that don't really have a well-defined process to deprovision users when they leave the university or change roles. That seems to be a problem in higher ed. And for us, it's unfortunate that once you have your Harvard key, which is our SSO account, it's actually for life. So a lot of service providers assume that once your role ends, your Harvard key is disabled, but that's not the case. So if they do not have a really good, well-defined process, users keep access for months or even years if they are looking. So even applications that actually are aware of, requirements for access based on your role don't sometimes grasp the nuances of an individual having multiple affiliations. So that's sort of like the problem we had. And we did realize there's this cool, IAM tool that you probably never heard of that does a lot of complex, user authorization use cases called Grouper, that we realized that can actually solve the problem in terms of front door. Next slide, please. All right, so in order to get the front door authorization going, we needed a policy. Harvard being Harvard, you need to get things written down so that you can have some enforcement mechanism. Believe it or not, we've actually been providing front door coarse-grained authorization through Grouper since 2018. But we had varying degrees of adoption. Some people use them, some people don't use them. It was just an option. We aren't requiring anybody to use it. So in order to get to the point where we actually can enforce this, we decided that we actually need to write a policy for how you get to integrate with single sign-on. And within that policy, we can have enforcement mechanisms in there. So we gathered a working group of stakeholders across the university, got this policy written, and Harvard being Harvard had to go to various committees to get the approval. So once we had this policy in place, it's implemented. Anybody else who's onboarding to use single sign-on now is required to use a coarse-grained authorization group from Grouper. You can't get your way out of it because now we have the policy to enforce that. Next slide, please. All right, so in addition to the policy, we actually work with the information security and data privacy team to sort of like formulate different various of assurance tiers that could then be translated into course groups. So these can marry the assurance tier, the application risk level, and what the identity people have. So our motto is that we want to ensure and protect the university's data and resources whilst enabling reliable, frictionless access to the right resources at the right time with the right identities. So comes the course grain filters that now when you are onboarding, you don't know what your population is, we can walk with you and sort of pick one of these tiers for you. For 80% of the service providers we have, these buckets work for them. And if it does not, we actually can now build application-specific groups for them that may not fit this mold. Next slide, please. So as of today, we actually have about 748 active applications. That's with about 2,500 registrations. Due to a security incident in late 2023, we actually now made it a mandate that all the applications that were onboarded prior to us implementing our policy now actually had to use a coarse grain authorization filter. We gave them 30 days. We worked with everybody else who didn't have it, and we applied those. And if you did not have time, we picked one of the generics and applied it to you. And if people then lost access, that would have been now impetus for you to come and work with us. Some initial pain points when we initially did that, but those were easily resolvable. An example would be somebody didn't think that vendors need access to their application, so they used a more restrictive group. And then, we can then give them exception groups for them to be able to give those people access. But as of today, pretty much every application that's using single sign-on at Harvard actually is required to use front door authorization. Next slide, please. All right, I'll hand it over to Erin.
Thanks, Alpha. Good afternoon, everyone. Application teams can select either generic authorization group filter or request an application group filter, application-specific group filter if they need more flexibility or want to add additional users with exceptions. The generic authorization filters, group filters, are most widely used. I'll give you a sec to read that over. Next slide, please. With the use of manually managed groups, the problem of deprovisioning users returns, especially when applications teams are not doing attestation on those groups. We have made things easier for teams by using the new membership eligibility requirement feature or Jigsaw scripts to enforce eligibility for managed groups. Next slide, please. And for those who are interested, here are our links. This is not interactive, so the links will be posted in the chat. And next slide. University of Alaska.
Thank you. So my name is David Bantz, and Orlandis Brown and I do identity and access management for the University of Alaska, which is a statewide system that includes 3 separately accredited universities and approximately 15 campuses around the state. 25 or 30,000 students and about 5,000 employees as of now. And we have in the system a lot of unified services, including our SAML single sign-on powered by the Shibboleth identity provider. Now, we're going to talk about a very specific application of front door authorization, a term I learned from Harvard and I love. We specifically were asked by a high-level steering committee to provide some way of monitoring and enforcing training requirements. So those requirements are laid out on this slide. We have a single complete historical record of employee and faculty training or other forms of compliance, some of which could even be self-attested. That we assign and track, so we provide a way for administrators to assign and track the training for individuals or groups of individuals through a web interface, that there's timely notifications sent both to supervisors and individual employees or faculty. And then enable access to a particular service to be gated by whether or not an individual has met the training requirements for that particular service, which we're doing in this front door authorization fashion, like Harvard and Penn are. So the result of that was a software development project, and I'm going to turn it over to Orlandis to describe that in more detail.
Yep. So maybe more on the requirements that we were given. I guess the expectation for the service that has been developed sort of began with the integration being sort of in real time as quickly as possible. You'd like to complete the training that you're assigned and be able to log into the service that requires it immediately following that, assuming you had been restricted from logging in before that. And then on our end, a lot of these services, or I guess as the implementer of this front door access thing, you'd question why the service itself can't really implement what we're expecting to be able to do attribute-based access control, or just showing users the error that they should expect to see if they haven't completed something that they're expected to complete. And this is sort of just something that, at least in our case, services aren't really willing to work with us on, or we can't really expect them to do it in a standard way to be able to cover all of the training and scenarios that we'd like them to. So for our case, we have a pretty simple solution, which just relies on the our identity provider, which is Shibboleth. It has a feature that allows us to check for those requirements for the service that the person is attempting to log into, and see that they have completed those requirements or not. So, and then it'll show a notification that they have or haven't. Next slide, please. So in the beginning, this is sort of what we had in mind for a goal of notifying the user of training completed, and maybe where they should go to view which trainings they still need to complete, or just view the requirements of the training that they haven't completed. And this is actually what we have now, what we're able to show now. So next slide, please. So as I was saying, one slide back, yeah. This is implemented almost entirely within the identity provider, Shibboleth. What it does is it uses the warning intercept module provided by Shibboleth, and it'll take an attribute resolver that queries the requirements for the service that is attempting, or that is being logged into, which are stored in just a MySQL database somewhere in the university system. And then it'll match those requirements with the entitlements of the user stored in the same database. And it'll sort of go by the level of requirement that is set for that service, whether the user should be blocked from logging into the service, or just be shown a notification, just a 30-second timeout, that sort of thing. And then it'll just display those requirements that haven't been met in a standard table, which you can click on to view the individual requirements for each training in the table. Next slide, please. So here's just an architecture diagram, or a flow diagram of what that looks like. You have the user going to sign in, and so on. And then eventually they get back to the error page where we'll show the requirements, or they'll see nothing otherwise if they have no unmet requirements for that service. Next slide, please. So on the badges project itself, it meets all of the requirements that were described earlier, given by the university. It just provides an interface for reporting on training completions and assignments within the university, and provides the ability for administrators to assign training to groups or individuals. And in some fashion, it gives you the ability to define the requirements for each service integrated in our single sign-on. You're able to set the individual trainings required by that service, and whether or not the user should get a notification if they haven't completed that training when they go to log into that service. So next slide, please. I think, oh yeah, this is just a picture of the employee record within that interface. It just shows the list of assigned trainings at that moment and when it was assigned and that sort of thing. So I'll show that later. Next slide, I think would be the demo. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'll play a prepared video of a live demo, sort of just going through the process of, or showing what it looks like to attempt login with a required training requirements on that. So here we have the service and the requirement defined. I'm just going to log into the IAM wiki for Alaska, and we'll see. I haven't yet taken the driver safety training that's required to log into the service. That's sort of just a placeholder requirement maybe, but a good example nonetheless. So I'm at the wiki and I go to log in. It's just a standard login. I'll use my credentials. And once I get to the end of the login flow, it'll hit me with the warning intercept because I have not completed that training that was assigned to me and is required for the service. So we have the driver training listed there. And from here, I'm able to click on the training, which will take me to the badges interface to show me the requirements needed for that training and what I should do to complete the training, to be able to gain access to the service. So I'll click on the row in the table, and then I'll see the actual page shown for this training. It'll tell me to go to the training provider's website. That's our risk management department at the university. And they'll have a catalog of training that I should take, which will include this driver training that I haven't taken yet. So I'm at their website now. I go down to where it'll display the driver training. And in this case, it's a Google form quiz. So this integration is between the badges database and the Google Sheets API that this form feeds into. So I take this quiz via Google form. I just answer the questions as you're seeing right now. And then our badges project, it'll pull the completion down from the Google Sheets API and read that I've scored a 9 out of 9, and it'll mark it complete in the database. There's my score there. And it'll award me a completion record in the database. So I'll no longer see the notification when I go to log in that I haven't completed the training. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going back to log in after refreshing my session. And just as before, I enter my credentials and sign in. And this time I shouldn't get any notification whatsoever. It will just let me through. Yep. So that's pretty much all there is to it. I'm going to show really quickly the badges interface, what this looks like. to maybe an administrator. If I go to my training, I'll see just my own completion of the driver training there near the bottom, along with other training assignments and completions. And that's how I can keep track of my own record and how others can for me as well. So I meant to go to the next slide, but I think we're moving on to the Q&A now. So thank you.
I'll just note that there are several other training providers that Orlandis has written specific integrations with, including those used by our research administration for training required of principal investigators.
Anything else?
Just wanted to, can I just say
Oh,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
We do have a little bit of time. We fit into our 15 minutes each. I'm impressed.
Yeah, we did.
I tried to, Penn did not lead off the way by taking up all of our time, but I just wanted to say that Harvard's mandate, where they want 100% coverage of front door is a very important issue or part of the history here. I know Alaska heard about it from Harvard. Penn actually did too. We had been discussing it in the past, but after Harvard's incident and 100% coverage, people were on board to make this happen. Before that, at Penn, we did have some intercepts in Shibboleth, maybe like half a dozen, but they're kind of complicated to set up in Shibboleth, and we really only wanted to configure that and support that if it's a central app that's important. So this is sort of a higher level maturity of IAM. Some of the smaller, more niche apps were on board but couldn't participate. And being able to make a generic intercept in your SSO that can be configured to do intercepts for any app is a very, very nice feature that improves security in the IAM stack. So hopefully more authentication operators can get on board with putting some authorization in there and doing it generically so that you can configure this for apps as opposed to doing a lot of work to change the configuration of the SSO. So right now we have a few dozen apps that take advantage of it. We prioritize them to try to do the important ones. When we have new registrations, we try to encourage them to do that. But I think all schools that are interested in this should consider some sort of mandate or some sort of way to get people like Harvard does from a very coarse-grained way. People should be at the institution that are using this app. And hopefully that'll get more adoption going forward.
Anything else to add before we go on to Q&A? All right. Well, great. So it looks like the first question is from Ariel. I see a lot of usage of Shibboleth. My institution is moving away from it. For those who use Shib, do you all have plans to move to something else like Azure and Entra? Anybody want to take that one?
We don't have plans right now to move from Shibboleth.
Alaska does not have plans, and I'll note that there's not an equivalence. I know that commercial vendors would like to say there is, but particularly some of the important additions that Penn and Harvard and we at Alaska have just shown you aren't really feasible extensions of those commercial services. So
I think Harvard has a better
very
answer
different
for you.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I think Harvard has a better answer for you. Alpha?
Yeah, we are Okta, so we actually by next summer, all of our Shibboleth cast, all of that is actually getting retired. We've moved to Okta, so we're actually in the middle of migrating all of our applications to Okta. So
Yep.
using Grouper, we are like provisioning groups to Okta and still providing the same level of service. So
Yeah, I wanted to
Okay.
just
Yeah, it's
underscore
impressive.
that this isn't like a Shibboleth or even a grouper topic. Alaska's doing this without grouper. And Harvard will soon be doing this without Shibboleth. So the front door authorization concept and experience hopefully can be abstracted away from the individual tools. We do have examples of how to do them in these tools. And hopefully if you go to Entrée, you can do a similar type thing.
You have something to add, David? No. I see Rusty put a comment in also that Entra supports SHIB, SAML, CAS, etc. So, all right. Nadeem is asking, how is the information sent back to the relational database once training is completed?
I assume this is for Alaska.
I assume so.
Well, we have that too,
So-
but you can go first.
Yeah. I mean, in our case, this is I guess there's a process that sort of runs parallel to everything else that periodically checks for training completions with its various different integrations. So for the training that I showed, where it's just a Google form, it'll use the Google Sheets API to check all of the different trainings that it has access to, all of their backing spreadsheets, to pull down the list of attempts on that quiz or training, and it'll read all of the attempts that were successful completions of the training, and it'll take that and just insert a record into the relational database, marking that as a completion and marking previous assignments for that user on that training as invalid at this point.
Yeah, at Penn, we have, unfortunately, it's not as real time as Alaska, so their use case is pretty interesting to me. We have a feed from Workday Learning to our warehouse, and then we have loader jobs in Grouper that load those into groups. We have considered changing that to attribute-based access control model where the training information has different attributes. So you could say it has someone taken this training, you can say, have they taken in the last year, or different attributes about it. But we do have some delay in getting that information. So if someone takes the training, it's not going to be reflected right away. One of our apps, Banner, requires a few trainings, and an admin can go in and put them in a 1-week reprieve group so that they have a week to do it. We also have notifications that come out of Grouper that remind people to take training a week before it's going to cut them off. So the training system does that too. But we can also get reports to the app owner so they can track people down. That is kind of a hard issue, but the first step is at least getting that information into your authorization system so that you can key off of it.
Anything else to add on that question? All right. Nadeem is also asking, are there samples of how to do the intercept in SHIB?
If you look at the answered questions, we posted our configuration for the generic one on the Grouper wiki, and there's a link there if you go to the answered tab. Anything that we've done at Penn, we're trying to share just so other people can leverage it, the non-private stuff. So if people have questions, we can track that down. But yeah, it's not simple. Steve Mack at Penn has figured out a way to do it and has shared that. So.
Okay, yeah, it looks like Ryan's also kind of asking a similar thing, if you all would be willing to share your work, because there are some folks who are not quite as experienced with SHIB interceptors and development. So is that the best place to go, Chris, for examples, or
that's for Penn. I don't know if Harvard or Alaska have examples on their side, or
if anyone would like examples, they can reach out to either me or David. I don't know if I should provide my email in chat or elsewhere.
Yeah, you can do that if you like, Orlandis. That would be terrific.
But yeah, just send us an email, and I have samples prepared just for our own use cases.
Yeah,
Great.
same Harvard. You can reach out to Erin, and we can show you our legacy, how we doing it, and how we're doing it for Okta. So
Perfect. All right. Well, oh, I do see another question here from Stan. Check out, oh, it just a comment on checking out the Cirrus Identity SAML in Common Bridge for ID Pass, like Entra and Okta. So thank you, Orlandis. You put email addresses there in the chat. If other presenters would like to do that as well, that would be great. Are there any other questions? We have plenty of time. Or anything else our presenters would like to add?
Well, I'd like to ask. I mean, Penn and Alaska are both impressed that Harvard got that requirement. How did you get buy-in to that?
We were really able to convince the institutional leaders that this is important, and the buy-in was that service providers didn't have to do too much work. Most of the work was actually done by IAM. All they needed to do was during onboarding to define what population needs access to their application. We could provide the group for them. So it wasn't like we're adding more work for them. It's IAM was doing all of the work. It's very transparent. And the security implications of not having one when you have service providers who really have a well-defined process on their end to deprovision users, and people are leaving the university and they're still having access for weeks or months on end. At some point in time, if you have a security incident, you will be hard-pressed to explain why aren't you doing something that's already provided by IAM. That doesn't involve much work on your end.
But also,
So-
you don't need buy-in when you have a mandate from the CISO or the CIO. I don't know what the politics are, but if institutions are going to be reactive and wait for a security incident so that the president has to say everyone do this, then everyone's going to do it. If you can be proactive and try to do that beforehand, yes, it's hard. You need the buy-in and everything else, but it's something that people should shoot for.
Right. Yeah, and it was also easy to have a policy that you cannot use SSO unless you use foreign door authorization. So that requirement from the get-go as you're working with IAM, that's just part of the process. So.
And then you have a requirement that you must use SSO if you can. So it's like just required.
Yeah. So.
Well, I'm interested to see, in the grouper chats or the shibboleth chats or whatever, if more people adopt this and what their experience is and if we can learn from each other. So I think it's an exciting area in IAM.
Thanks for sharing your experiences about it. Oh, I see one more question from Matthew. How does IT handle requests from the community when someone cannot perform their job due to the training? He's heard mention of a reprieve who approves this. We're thinking of using a similar approach to gain 100% compliance on security awareness training.
Yes.
Oh, and then mentioned heard work this into policy. Yeah.
Yeah, at Penn, everything is grouper groups. If you're familiar with grouper groups, you can set up your policy however you want. So in the banner front door group, you have to either be trained or be in this reprieve group. And the reprieve group, if anyone adds you to that, there's a default of a 1-week expiration. So you have basically like 5 days to take that training and then, a day for it to trickle through the warehouse. And the service owner approves that, and the service owner of banner is our registrar, group. And if they make that determination, they can make that determination. Or, maybe it's someone says they took it and they can go check in the training system. They took it, it just hasn't flowed through yet. So add them to the reprieve and they get immediate access. Obviously you want people to take training if that's the requirement, but you don't want to block people from doing their work. So you just have to, at your institution, figure out if that's something you want to do or if how to do it.
Phil's asking for Chris. Your circles had some workers not needed two-step. Is that correct?
Yeah, so at Penn, we try to get 100% compliance of two-step. We just have certain populations that aren't required. So our health system is an example. They have their own credentials with their own two-step, and it's we're trying to get a proxy so that we can leverage that. We're not there quite yet. But you know, if there's an app that's for like donors or something like that, we don't want to require people to use two-step to go and donate money to Penn. Hopefully most of the business apps, they're not going to accept people who don't have two-step either because they're not required, or we do have a way to get an exception for two-step, and you know, now that Duo is pretty accessible and there aren't a lot of reasons to do that. If you're a VIP and you say you don't want to use two-step, you know, maybe they'll give it to you, but you won't be able to get into a lot of the important apps if you need them. So then you sort of need to. Yeah, I mean, it's at your institution, if you have 100%, you know, adoption of MFA for all your users, you don't have to worry about it. At Penn, we're like, you know, sort of on the cusp there, and this is one of the ways to drive everyone to get it. I don't know. Someone else at Penn can answer that too. I'm not like the authority of MFA at Penn, but
All right. Garth is asking, how long did the grouper piece take to implement?
I mean, you might know me, I'm the grouper lead, so everything is pretty quick for me, but we worked on this project maybe for a year. So you know, piece by piece, we sort of built it up and added, you know, the report thing and the self-service thing. I can share that part with people. And you know, even designing some of the group structures for licensing. Um, it's not all that complicated. One of the things that we're working on in the near term is integrating more AI stuff with Grouper to help write those scripts and do those things to at least give you a starting point. Not to say that you don't need to understand it, but at least it helps you do it quicker. But um, on the Uncommon Grouper Slack channel, if you're on there, we can discuss it. I can show some of those things, and you'll see that, you know, each of these little screens or whatever is like 100 lines of GSH code. I guess it depends on how experienced you are as a programmer and how comfortable you are with Grouper. So
All right. Looks like we have another question just came in. What are the biggest technical hurdles in integrating your authentication systems like CAS and SSO with centralized authorization frameworks like Grouper?
Well, I don't want to be an evangelist for Okta, but that was fairly really simple to do. So, and even our legacy wasn't that complicated other than a buggy CAS management UI, which we are glad to be moving away from. So,
yeah, I'll say at Penn, going back to levels of maturity, I mean, first you need to have entitlements that come from SSO, right? And so that basically means that certain groups or all groups are available to be sent to services based on if the user's in them. For the front door stuff, if you can make an intercept, you can make a generic intercept. And so spending that time on something generic that can be configured outside didn't seem like a heavy lift. The Shibboleth people made it seem easy at Penn. And so I mean, I would say most of our time was discussing exactly what we wanted to do, you know, debating what the reference groups have in them, how everything is sort of organized. The other thing that took a little bit of time was figuring out how to get real-time entitlements into Shibboleth, because, you know, if someone goes and claims a license, we want them to go back and be able to get into the service without waiting 30 minutes. So like Garrick said in his slide, we originally had a thing that just copied SQL data from the Grouper database to Shibboleth, and that would run every 15 minutes and kind of like a full sync. Then we explored doing LDAP provisioning from Grouper, but when we had large groups, it would take you know, maybe up to 10 minutes for a group of 100,000 people or 150,000 people. And that sort of like gums up the change log where other changes don't get provisioned. So luckily we have Postgres running locally for Shibboleth, and we have Postgres in Grouper, and Garrick had the idea that we do logical replication on a few tables, and that is instantaneous. So going down that path, it took a little bit of time to explore and figure out what to do. But once you have those building blocks in place, everything sort of comes together to make it work. So if you look at it at a high level at Penn, this whole front door thing is not like a ton of code or a ton of configuration or anything. It's pretty elegant. It's just sort of getting to that agreement that that's where you want to go and putting all the pieces in place.
Yeah, I everything Chris said. I think that there's always a challenge to adopt new things and to make everything reliable. So there was, you know, a lot of thinking about this stuff, and then the ultimate actual work was, a lot of it was pretty quick. There was some effort around monitoring and making sure, you know, we were going to system failures were contained and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward, you know. I think and yeah. So we did have to write some different Postgres monitors, and you know, that's about it.
To also add, you don't only have to use Grouper for coarse grain, because some service providers at Harvard are actually using it for finer grain access control through the member of attribute during authentication. So we have people who are only using it for front door, others are using it for both because they say they like it that way, that Grouper is just the one-stop place they can do their role-based access control. So those are all, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, I know we're trying to end this meeting. Some people think you're using Grouper, that means it's secure. It doesn't mean that. You can have a manual group and put people who shouldn't be using the system. The coarse grain thing, if you say it, you have to be an employee, and then you have the in the system group as manual. It's sort of like a security blanket. You don't have to worry about deprovisioning quite as much. I mean, you should deprovision, but if it's not as quick or whatever, the front door sort of like fills that gap.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, all of you, to today's presenters for a terrific session, sharing your experiences and your wisdom.